saw in the slide. The final thing we have up here is override description, and as you can see, it's for buttons only. But if I, for example, wanted to call this activity a new thing, I could do that by going in and putting in a new line. Then find the UID of the item. So if I just press this, you will see that it's UID 103. And instead of just moving it, let me call it something different, new ACT for activity, and say that I just want to override it. Like this. So what will happen is when I open the window, it's called new ACT instead, or whatever you want. But again, override description is only for buttons. For the rest of the overrides, you should use the normal control double click in order to change the description of fields and labels. Let's quickly go back to the from and to pane, which we didn't go into that much in this session yet. The from and to pane is a system that can go on and tell you if you want to move something from one tab to another, you want to put in a new pane. We have some good guides on from and to pane, so I will urge you to see those, but essentially you most of the time need to have the same number. It's not that you take from this pane and put it onto another pane, so it's not the from pane you are moving to the pane, it's more that you can have it over multiple panes. But again, there's a guide in the download that explains these panes in details and give good examples on them. These were the system item lines. Let's explore the UDF item lines. They are not the same because they need different things. Up here, data is also already data bound and in its existing positions with the types defined, while in the UDF you are taking a field off the screen and putting it onto the main screen instead. The first thing we have is deactive, so you can again deactivate things you don't want temporarily. And the next is item UID. And up here it was already given by SAP, but in this case you want or you need to put in a unique UID that you define yourself. As default, with the right click, it will try to give it the same name as the field, but the limitation being that the field can be 20 characters long, while the item UID can only be 10 characters long. So if it's short enough, it will just give it a name, else you might want to give it a different name. I have a tendency, because this is item tracing tool, to call them IPT_1, _2 and so on, because that is easy to remember. And it can fit the limitation of 10 characters. One thing is that these item UIDs are case sensitive, so essentially I would be able to do this, a little p, a little t, 1. These two items would be able to be there both, because they are not the same. And also remember this if you want to work with it later on in the validation system, for example. So please be aware of that. Next is description. The description of the field, what you want to see. In edit text, combo boxes and so on, it will be the label in front of that, while in checkboxes it will be the caption of the text. Next is the table and the field, and that tells us what the field actually representing in the database. So in my case of the hide from list, we can see with the system information turned on that my hide from list at the end of the string in the lower left corner, you can see that it's called OCRD. That's the table, because that is the BP master data table. and then u underscore boy underscore tb underscore 0, sorry. And that is what we put in here. Right click again automatically populates this, but if you wanted to go in and do one manually, you would need to put in a table and a field in order to work with it. And you can only work with the tables that is already on the screen. I couldn't take a user-defined table and put it in here and just imagine that it would be linked to the data. That is a much more complicated task of doing. So you can only take the user-defined fields you have on the business partner master data on the business partner master data window. On item master data, you can only take the item master data user-defined fields, and so on. Next is the type, and as you can see, it has, in this case, because it's a combo box here, chosen combo box for us. But it is essentially possible to change the type for some configurations. For example, I could change this to an edit text, and let's see what happens then. You can see I get an error message, and I'm not allowed to change something with valid values into something with an edit text. But in this case, it's a valid values of yes and no, y and n. So because checkboxes work this way, I can actually change it into a checkbox and get my combo box into a checkbox instead. So there's a few limitations, and you don't normally want to change this. Most places it is that if you have a combo box with two values, you want to change it into a checkbox instead. And sometimes if you have an edit text over here, you might want to have it multi-line, so you can press enter to get another line. Then you would need to change the edit text into a text area. Pictures, of course, only making sense for UDFs of type picture. Moving along, we have the left and the top and the width and the height, and the from and the to pane working exactly as the system item lines. It's the position and the tabs we are on. Then we have label. Label not making sense for checkbox, but for the rest, if it's one of these, it can set up a label in front of the data. So if I turn this back into a combo box, you can see I have label turned on, and it has the label hide from this. But it could be that I don't want a label for my field. I could turn that off, and it will instead give me a yes, no. But in this case, it makes sense to have a label. The label needs to know how wide it should be. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, and that's the reason for that is this is the same length as the field of name, which we placed below. Then we have the link to. Again, if we put in data into the screen and we want to size it, do resizing, we wanted to put in the link to, but again, we have a separate session on that entire topic alone. Finally, we have the three fields called edit add, edit OK, and edit find. And if you know function buttons, it will be familiar, because I can say that I am not allowed in OK mode to edit my my field, for example. It would be a field I can only put in once and work with. So in this case, you can see in find mode it's open, while as soon as I go to OK mode, it's closed down. I cannot work with it. And you can of course do different combinations, saying it's only it's not editable in add mode, it's not editable in find mode if you don't want to. So this was a walkthrough of the different features you have in item placement tool. But the item placement tool have a lot of additional information, and for that we have some tip of the week sessions on the specific topics. The first I want to urge you to see is week 32 of 2010 that have tips on working with item placement tool and how to use the link to system. It will tell you how to deal with the different sizing of a window and how to use the link to system in order to control where fields are being placed. The second tip of the week session is week 33 of 2010. That deals on how to work with font size issues. I haven't come into this in this session, but essentially there's a problem in the way the SAP Business One SDK works in regards to font sizes. So if you have multiple font sizes on different screens or different users, you would need to have multiple configurations as well. And this session dives into that in much more detail than we could cover here. This concludes this session. For training material, please go to service.boyum-it.com/education, or if you want a free demo of the product, go to license.boyum-it.com/b1up. If you want to contact us, you can do it either by our sales email or our support email. Thank you for attending.